On today's show, we're going to be looking at the standouts from the Hlinka Gretzky Cup tournament. We're going to look at the podium teams today. So who are the best players of Canada, Czechia, and Sweden? We'll look at that, and you'll find this out on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. And Hadi with Sebastian Hai, we're both directors of scouting at Dobber Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down the standouts from the Hlinka Gretzky Cup. And we're going to start things off here with the podium team. So in the first segment, we'll look at Canada's standouts from this tournament. In the second segment, we'll look at Czechia's standouts from the tournament. And in our third segment, we'll look at Sweden and their standouts from this tournament. We have a lot of great prospects to talk about for today's episode. Before we get into any of this, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins, so visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, as always, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you thought of the episode and who you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So I just got back from Edmonton. I watched the whole tournament live, and it was a great event. So I'll be taking mainly the charge on the analysis of these players, but first and foremost here for Canada, talk us through the main standouts. You did watch a couple of games here. I'm guessing you watched a decent amount of Canada. Let's start out in goal, where I think we had the best performance from a Canadian goaltender in recent memory, right?
100%, and that's saying quite a bit because Canadian goaltenders are often quite good internationally. And we saw that with Carter George at the U18 Worlds just a couple months ago. But yep. Jack Ivankovic was dominant for Team Canada at this tournament. He absolutely lit it up. He had a sub-1 goal against average with 0.75 and a .967 save percentage. Statistically, that is absurdly good. With only he only let in 3 goals on 89 shots in his 4 starts at the tournament. And he's a player that impressed me a lot last year as well when he was playing the crease in Mississauga with Ryerson Leenders. And he's a player that combines a high degree of intelligence with a lot of athleticism. And he's so refined in his movements in the crease as well. He tracks pucks well. And overall, this is a really exciting goaltending prospect that I think, if we go back a couple of years, we saw other goaltenders be really hyped up, like Gabriel Day for this draft class. But I think it's pretty clear who the top Canadian goaltender for the 2025 draft class is here.
Yeah, absolutely. The only knock against him is his size, and honestly, he compensates for it so well with basically perfect positioning, elite composure. Just an amazing goaltender, and it really showed that in this tournament. But I do want to talk about the standout for me in this tournament, and it was Matt Schaefer. The big left-handed defenseman. He's been playing with the Erie Otters this past year, and he looked absolutely fantastic. I mean, for me, he actually put himself in the conversation for the top 3, maybe even top 2 there with James Higgins and Porter Martone and that kind of mix. Think Sam Dickinson with a better brain. Just elite understanding of the game, really, really good skating, fantastic gap closing ability. He was great in all 3 zones. He was active offensively. He was using his skills to get around 4 checkers in the offensive zone and kind of accessing the slot for his shots. Really comfortable on the backhand. There's just so much to his game that's incredibly easy to love. I think that Matt Schaefer overall has really put himself in the conversation there in the top 3, and it's well-deserved. I mean, when you have a player who thinks the game that well, who has that level of mobility, who has that level of skill, there's just so much to work with there with Matt Schaefer, and I think that, come draft day, he's going to be the top defenseman picked off the board there in the 2025 NHL draft. I don't even think that's a question. There were talks about Logan Hensler and Sacha Boumedienne, and another prospect we're going to talk about in the next episode. We'll leave that as a surprise because he was another real standout in this tournament. But Matt Schaefer was by far and away the best defenseman in this tournament, and for me, by far and away the best defenseman in this draft. Just ridiculous level of awareness, composure, skill. It's all there with him. I really, really like this tournament in this game. And he was even more impressive live. And I was sitting next to some scouts from a couple of NHL teams, and every time he touched the puck or did something, they would be impressed. And it's very rare to hear a scout audibly go, wow, or, throw some expletives in there. But yeah, they were thoroughly impressed, and so was I. But we do need to talk about the player that I think we all expected to be a standout of this tournament, and Gavin McKenna. Talk me through his tournament, because 6 points in 5 games isn't all that, but there was a lot more to his game outside of the point production, right?
Oh my God, of course. It's Gavin McKenna. This is a player who is playing at a very high level, and he dominated the U18 Worlds as well in May, alongside Matt Schaefer, and to a greater degree than Matt Schaefer did at that point. And I think that this is one of the better D-2, D-1 players that we've seen in the last couple seasons. And he's so dynamic. He's so intelligent. He's constantly creating with the puck on his stick, and even his off-puck movement is high end. Like, he is a really complete offensive package, and to do what he's doing at such a young age is absurdly impressive. And while the point production at this tournament wasn't perhaps as lights out as it was in May, I still think that he had a very strong tournament, and was quite clearly one of the 2 or 3 most dynamic players in the tournament as a whole, and doing so as a player that's not even draft eligible yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his ability to just shift defensives and do whatever he wants with the puck is just so impressive. But I do want to talk about, for me, the player who showed the most improvement since last year, and it's Caleb Desnoyers. He is a big center from the QMJHL, and the Q has had a bit of struggles in the last couple of years in terms of producing talent, but I think that Desnoyers is going to flip that on its head. He looked like a top 15 pick in this tournament for me. So physical, so quick, really hard forechecker, really intense back checker, great defensively, great offensively. He was playing on the top power play and the top PK for Canada, which is something that you rarely see from a QMJHL draft eligible in a tournament like this. It takes a lot to be able to perform on both sides of the ice like he did. He's incredible on face-offs as well. His game is really, really complete, and he has a couple of key marquee offensive traits as well. He's a great passer, a decent shooter, great puck handler as well. I love his creativity with the puck. So just so much to like there. And I do also want to talk about his partner in crime in this tournament, in Emile Guité. He's also from the QMJHL. He played for Chicoutimi. Last year, he put up almost a point a game as a draft -1 in that league, and was really good in the playoffs as well. What I saw from him in the playoffs last year was a kind of intense, physical, forechecking kind of player. I think he really upped the ante in terms of physicality and intensity in the playoffs there for Chicoutimi. But in this tournament, he really focused on the offense, and we saw how much of a trigger man he is. I mean, he shoots everything. He just shoots everything on net. Off the rush, in transition, on the half wall in the power play, his one-timers were like the key creative force in terms of goal scoring opportunities for Canada on the power play. So just, a real trigger man, but I also really liked some flashes of his playmaking skill as well. He did show some passing ability and a lot of that good stuff. So those two really worked well together. They developed a great chemistry. I think that Emile Guité is going to be a great pick in the NHL draft. I think he's a first rounder, given his goal scoring ability and creativity and flashes of playmaking skill, but also the defensive acumen, the physicality, and the forechecking skill. He's got a lot to work with. I do want to talk about Cole Reshny as well. I think he was a points leader for Canada, if I'm not wrong. Great production.
He was right there in the mix. Like, he was tied with Guité with 7 points in 5 games. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think most, if not all of his points came in the first half of the tournament, but Reshny was really impressive as well. He was using his speed and transition to create. Cole Reshny overall really impressed me with his handling skill, speed, goal scoring ability as well, but mostly the playmaking skill. He started the tournament off on the first line with Gavin McKenna, and I think he stayed there for a decent amount. He was bumped down to the second line at one point with Desnoyers and Guité, and I think that's where he was the most supportive. But on the first line, he's really trying to kind of lead play, kind of skate pucks up the ice and make things happen. I also want to talk about Alex Huang, who was Matt Schaefer's D partner. He's also from the QMJHL. He had a really good tournament. His concerns are kind of the same that I had from last year. He's not the best rush defender. He's a bit too aggressive and doesn't really use surfing to kind of shepherd defensive forwards to the outside. But offensively, he's an elite playmaker. He reminds me a bit of Zane Parekh in that respect. I think Parekh is definitely more inventive, more creative, and more skilled, and a bit better defensively. But I feel like Alex Huang's a good kind of beta version of him, where you get a bit of the same effects in terms of playmaking skill and inventiveness, but kind of worse defensively. But overall, I thought he had a great tournament, but I felt like he was kind of limited by playing with Matt Schaefer, because Schaefer's the guy who's going to, jump up the ice and create and activate offensively, and you can't have both of your defensemen doing that, especially not with the quality of offensive forwards that Canada had in the top end of their lineup. You don't want Gavin McKenna holding the point. That's not where he's the most effective, right? So I feel like he was a bit limited, but the shifts he played with the likes of Jackson Smith and those guys in kind of the lower end in the second or third pair when, Canada was coming off a power play, I thought it was at his most effective there. And lastly, I do want to talk about Luca Romano, who had a decent tournament, playing on the third line mostly. I think he was Canada's best cycle forward. He was really, really good off the cycle. I love the way that he just slips passes under sticks and, draws pressure to him off the cycle. He's really good at protecting the puck and moving off the wall. He's a player I think, people are going to have to look out for in the next few years. He's not the best skater, but God, is he creative and inventive and skilled off the cycle. That was a great part of his game. But that makes it a wrap for our first segment in terms of the standouts for Team Canada. We're going to look at the standouts for Team Czechia, and there were a couple of really interesting names that we can talk about here. We'll get into that in just a second, but just before, a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
I love sports. I love them so much that I just never want them to stop, which makes the summer lull a really difficult time because as a sporting fan, you always want to have things to get excited for. But with FanDuel, the sports keep sportsing all summer long, especially because I can open up the app whenever I'm in the mood, and I can place bets on anything that's going on at the moment, whether it's golf or Major League Baseball. I can take the swings that I want to take. So even though the NHL playoffs and draft are now far in the rearview mirror, and we're looking ahead at the following seasons, there's still a lot to get excited for. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus every single day. That's right. There's something for everyone daily all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Alrighty, so let's start things off here in our second segment with Team Czechia's standouts. They earned a silver medal in this tournament, played really well throughout it. And there was one marquee standout we can start off with, and it's Adam Benak. He was by far and away the best player on Czechia. I'll let you take the reins on this player because we've been both watching him for the last couple of years. I'm more than comfortable kind of breaking his game down, but you're the European director of scouting for Dauber. You've been watching him for a while, so talk me through his game.
I mean, yeah, he is a absolute bunch of fun. He's a high-end puck handler. He's a really speedy player. He can play at center or on the wing, and he was dominant at this tournament for Czechia. Despite only being 5'7" and 157 pounds, he scored 11 points in 5 games, including 4 goals, which was good for second in the tournament in points. And he was the beating heart of this Czechia team. He was the creative force. He was the fulcrum. And whenever they were in the offensive zone and he was on the ice, the puck was always going in his direction. And whenever he had the puck on his stick, something was happening. He made some mistakes during the tournament, but still, like, the positives far outweighed the negatives. And he's just such an exciting and dynamic player who, in my opinion, is going to be the next 5'7" player to be drafted inside the first round, following the lead of Cole Caulfield from that 2019 draft. And there's so much to be excited for in this player, but the raw skill and creativity and such quick, like lightning speed processing of the game is really key to what makes him tick. And I see a player here that has a really, really high upside and definitely still has a ways to go to hit that. But the raw potential here is beyond exciting.
Oh, for sure. I do want to add on Benak. He has exactly everything I look for from a 5'7" player to play in the NHL. So dynamic offensively, really creative off the rush, uses great rush patterns to get up the ice. But above all that, it's the physical skill along the boards. He still got out-muscled. Obviously, he's 5'7", 157. That's inevitable. But he was able to circumvent some of those problems with great sealing ability. He's really good at heading through defenders' hands instead of through their body to limit what the defender can do towards the puck. He's really good at kind of sealing the boards off and kind of using his body to spin off at checks and get the puck to the middle of the ice. Intense forechecker, brings a lot of energy. Like, he has so much of the things I look for from these more skillful kind of 5'7" players in order to make them NHLers. Think Martin St. Louis, think Cole Caulfield as well, who has some of those skills. It takes a specific skill set to make it work, and he does have it. So I think he's going to prove his way to the NHL, which is what 5'7" players need to do. Every step of the way, they need to prove they can do it. He's going to do it. I'm fairly certain. Let's move on to Vít Zahejský, who was a player who started off in kind of the middle six for Czechia and quickly earned his way up to the top line with Adam Benak and was kind of running shotgun on that line. Outside of his shot selection, I liked pretty much everything I saw from him. Really intense forechecker, really good with the puck in transition. I love the way he would curl his kind of wrists off a stop up in the offensive zone to kind of fool a defenseman into kind of thinking he's going to shoot and then kind of curling his wrist around him and kind of accessing space around him. Just great skills offensively as well. Great playmaker, comfortable on the backhand. So yeah, Vít Zahejský really impressed me in this tournament, and I think he might be a first rounder. I'm not there yet, But I think overall there's enough there to make Vitsahaysky a draft pick for sure. Probably going to be a second or third rounder. He's not the biggest, but he's got enough skill overall to make it work. And I really like this game. And I want to talk about the third line center most of this tournament for Czechia, and Dominik Pavlik. Pavlik was really good in transition, used his speed really well to get up the ice. I didn't find him to be the most creative force on Czechia's team, but he did exactly what was needed from him. He forechecked hard, he backchecked hard, he won faceoffs, won his board battles, got off the wall. The things you want to see from a third line center he brought, and I thought he was one of the reasons why Czechia was able to have a deep run in this tournament. He was really effective in that bottom six for them. I also want to talk about a 2026 NHL draft eligible in Adam Novotny, who played. He was basically stuck on Benak's wing this entire tournament, and he showed great skill, great creativity in transition. I thought his game was really refined for an underage player in this tournament. Overall, he brought a decent game to this tournament. He's a November birthday, so he's going to be one of the oldest players in next year's draft, kind of on the same range as Gavin McKenna, who was a December birthday as well. But yeah, Adam Novotny for me, great skill, great creativity. I'm going to need to watch more of him to kind of nail down exactly what his specialties are, but so far I see hands, I see passing, I see goal scoring. It's a great combination of offensive skills. And I want to talk about two defensemen here for Czechia as well that stood out, and Radim Mrtka, who is the top right shot defenseman on that team, and by the end it felt like he was playing 55 out of the 60 minutes in that tournament, right?
Oh my God, it totally did. And I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that too. I mean, on the one hand, he's 6'6", 198 pounds, right shot. And he's already been playing some professional games. Like he got into 3 games last season in the top Czech pro division with HC Ochelary Trinek. And on top of that, he's also a June 9th, 07 birthday. He is young for the draft class, but his poise on the puck, his decent mobility for his size, and his intelligent gap management, I thought, were really solid throughout the tournament. And he uses his range really, really well to patrol a wide area in the defensive zone. The offensive ability, I thought, was okay in flashes, but he was very much a shutdown defenseman in his role at this tournament and was playing the minutes to compensate for that role too.
100%. I thought it was great in this tournament. Also want to talk about Tomáš Melinek, who was pretty good in this tournament as well. He played a decent kind of defensive game. Obviously, he started off as a 7th defenseman on that team and was mainly kind of tasked with penalty killing responsibilities and that kind of stuff. But by the end of the tournament, he had forced his way into the top 4 for Czechia, and it's mainly because of how good he was with his back to the play on retrievals. Going back and getting a puck in his own zone and trying to break it out. I felt like he was incredibly comfortable in those situations. He was able to kind of shake off forecheckers and make his way to the middle of the ice. He was able to kind of fake his way out of scenarios where he was pressured and kind of access open ice and to make a pass. Overall, just a really refined game for a player who, by the way, the highest level of competition he's played so far is Czech U17 hockey. This is not a player with a lot of experience in higher levels, and he looked like one of the most refined and mature players on that blue line. There's a reason he ended up on the second line for them is he's really good in all 3 zones. He was showing some activity offensively as well. He was getting up the ice, getting puck touches in the offensive zone. But what really, really stood out for me is how poised and composed he was on retrievals. That was something I did not expect from a player with this level of competition so far. Great tournament from him, and I thought he really stood out. I'm curious to see where he ends up playing in this next year because I think he's better than Czech U17 hockey. I think he should be playing at the very least at the U20 level, if not in pro, because he showed a lot of refinement and polished kind of maturity to his game. So I'm curious to see where he ends up. And last but not least, let's talk about the goaltender for Czechia, Andrej Stebatok, who I think had the second best save percentage in this tournament. Was really, really good in terms of, stopping big chances from big teams. I don't think he's a draft pick, mainly because there's a lot wrong with his kind of technique, his composure. I don't think this is necessarily a calm goalie. He was scrambling a lot, but I thought he had a great run in this tournament, and there's a reason why he ended up with a .945 save percentage, just because he's really athletic, and he's able to make those scramble saves. So there were a lot of chances where he would go post to post, I think to a fault. Sometimes he would take himself out of place completely, but overall, when you have a goaltender here who puts out a .945 save percentage on his way to a silver medal, you have to kind of mention him. He had a great tournament in terms of numbers, in terms of production. Something about his lack of composure, his lack of technique, where it looks a bit weird, but I think an NHL team is going to be convinced by this tournament, and especially if he has a great season this upcoming year, I think he ends up being drafted for sure. But that's our second segment done. We'll get into our third, where we talk about Sweden's standouts, and they had a really good group this year. We'll get into that in just a second, but just before, a quick word from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Alrighty, so let's move on right away to our third segment here and close things off with our breakdown of Sweden's standouts here for the Hlinka Gretzky Cup. And we're going to start off here with a line that ended up together by the end of the tournament, who played really, really well together. Victor Klingsell, Milton Gaystreen, and Ivar Stenberg. Klingsell and Gaystreen are 2025 NHL draft eligibles, and they play fundamentally different games. Gaystreen is very much move off the puck and shoot type of forward, whereas Victor Klingsell is about as pure a playmaker as you get. There was one game where I scouted Victor Klingsell in detail, where he made 6 behind-the-back one-touch passes in the same game. Like, his vision's ridiculous, and he doesn't keep the puck for long. He likes to distribute. He likes to move off the puck, but he's still able to keep the puck and show some dynamic skill. It's just his game naturally lends itself to quick touch plays, which do work in the NHL. One-touch plays, give and goes, those types of plays, playmaking-wise, are the plays that usually translate really well to the NHL. I think Victor Klingsell is going to be a really good NHLer. It's a short sample, obviously, and I haven't watched a lot of him last year, but in the little I've seen from him this year, I saw a lot of translatability. Victor Klingsell is a really good prospect. I think he's going to be a first rounder this upcoming year. He's going to be more than deserving of it. And by the way, Sweden's 2025 NHL draft class is so much better than their 2024 class, right?
Not even close. I mean, you have at least 3 players in this 2025 class from Sweden that would have been the top Swedish draft eligible last year by a mile. So there's a lot of talent here, and I mean, Victor Klingsell is a really interesting player, as you mentioned, and he's also a guy who spent most of last season at the J18 level and only got into 15 games at the J20, where he scored 4 points in 15 games. He's not even really a front runner for the top Swedish draft eligible this year. That would be Anton Frondell. You also have Sasha Boumedienne right in there as well in the mix, and a couple other players like Philip Ekberg. You have so many Swedes this year that are going to be contending not only to be picked in the first round, but in the top 15, in the top 10, in the top 5 even. So a lot to be excited for on the Swedish side of things this season. But there's so many other players from this Swedish team that are worth mentioning. And I think I'll start off here with Sasha Boumedienne, because he was fantastic at this tournament, despite not scoring a single point in his 5 games. We saw a lot of the same things that were very apparent last season at the USHL level with Youngstown. He makes mistakes, certainly. He's not a perfect player. He still has some processing warts in his game, but the mobility, the size, the range, like he's 6'2", 183 pounds, left shot defenseman, and obviously also from a hockey family. He has that going for him too, but this is a player who's able to leverage his mobility and his offensive instincts to really create at a high level, and on top of that, also add a ton of value in the defensive zone. Stylistically, we were talking about this before the episode today, there are comparables here to Artem Levshinov and how he approaches the game, and also how he's been developing leading up to his draft year. And I think there's a lot to be excited for in this player.
For sure. I do want to go back to Ivar Stenberg real quick, because he's a 2026 NHL draft eligible, and I don't think a lot of people expected him to kind of take control of a line in the top 6. But oh my goodness, he's good. He's so creative offensively, really skilled. He's got a lot of transition skill as well. He's able to kind of roll off his skates and get down the ice with really good crossover usage. He consistently pushes the middle and makes things happen. I think Ivar Stenberg is setting himself up to have a fantastic draft -1 season this year, and kind of set himself up as a front runner for the 2026 NHL draft. He's got a lot of skill, a lot of creativity. He showed some decent defensive flashes as well. I wouldn't say he's necessarily an intense player, but he's a really skilled player who's extremely opportunistic. He's really good in short bursts, setting up the ice, plays well between checks. I was just so impressed overall with his game. I wanted to give him a quick shout out before we move on. And Philip Ekberg, who you mentioned as well, he's a player who at 15 years old played a couple of Allsvenskan games in his draft -2 season. And this year has been incredibly impressive for Sweden in this tournament. I did not understand why he spent a lot of time in Sweden's bottom 6, because he was the energy injection on every single line that he played. At one point, Jakub Ishvozniak, who had a pretty bad tournament this season, this year round, he got bumped down to the 4th line because that second line wasn't working with him. And they bumped up Philip Ekberg to that line, and Ekberg just took control of it. all of a sudden that line was working really well. Everyone was forechecking hard, back-checking hard, making plays in transition. And Ekberg is exactly that. He's just pure energy. He's got so much maturity to his defensive game and to his transition game. And in the offensive zone, he's got a decent shot. He's got an ability to push the middle, to just drive the net. At one point, he scored 2 goals in Sweden's first game by doing exactly that, by just driving the net and going to his backhand. So yeah, I think there's a lot to love here in Philip Ekberg, and for me so far, he's a top 20, 25 pick in this draft. He's going to be a really good player, and I don't understand why. Again, he spent a lot of time in Sweden's bottom 6 because everywhere he played, he was pretty much the energy injection on that line. So I would have loved to see him in the top 6, playing with Gaystreen and Klinksell and those kinds of players, but it is what it is. Let's close things off here with another defenseman that I hadn't really watched or heard much about this tournament, in Malte Voss. Malte Voss he's a big defenseman, left-handed, I believe, and played a really good tournament. Just overall was extremely reliable defensively. He didn't put up many points, but you couldn't get past him in transition. He was a main reason why Sweden contended. Well, Sweden beat USA and contended with a couple other teams in terms of where they ended up in this tournament. He was a real just a force defensively, really difficult to handle down low, below the goal line, along the boards. I thought Malte Voss had a fantastic tournament. He played most of this tournament to the right of Hugo Hallin, who's a smaller, more offensive defenseman for Sweden. And I thought he was the real stabilizing force on that line, because Hallin is very much an aggressive kind of pinch up defenseman. So you needed someone on the backhand who could handle transitions, and Voss showed some great play, some great skating, some great defensive stick work. It was just really, really, really reliable for Sweden. And I know for a fact that he impressed a decent amount of scouts there at this tournament. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's drafted fairly high. Not necessarily skilled, not a player I would go for in the first round, but he really showed enough to be drafted for sure. But that's our episode done. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, make sure to like and subscribe. Let us know down below what you think of the episode, what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating and review, and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next show as we continue our breakdown of the Hlinka Gretzky Cup standouts here for the rest of the tournament's teams. This has been Hadi Kalikesh and Sebastian Hai, and we hope you tune in next time.